Hey Saints, well, a little bit blown away here. I'm looking at this video from Skywatch TV, and this Hebrew gentleman on the right is Rabbi Glazerson, who's big into the Torah codes in Israel. And then sitting next to him is um, Richard Shaw, who did a video on Torah codes. Um, he he frequently partners with L.A. Marzulli, but I think this project was his own. And I guess semi-unannounced, Rabbi Glazerson flew to California this week to talk to Richard Shaw because of one of the tables that just came up, which you guys can watch this full interview. But basically the point was Rabbi Glazerson found a Torah code table that said Purim 5776, which that's this Hebrew year, and it said Mashiach, and there was also a table that talked about the light coming or whatever, and so he got so excited that Messiah, Mashiach, is coming this Purim, and he was trying to get the word out. And so here, just listen a little quick recap of this, and then there's a whole bunch of stuff we got to talk about because, well, I think this is just amazing. So I'm trying to take her down a notch just so we don't all get too excited about some of this stuff. But it's a pretty big deal. Hang on.
Well, Rabbi Glazerson, unfortunately, we have limited time for this program, but I do want to ask you, how do you interpret the codes that have been coming up that seem to point to Purim, Nibiru, and Mashiach? What do you make of all of this?
You see, the first thing is that people speak about it all over when you look. So the date is coming out 26th of March, which is Purim. You see, so it's amazing that Purim comes in this table with Nibiru, very small skip, every 3 letters, every 4 letters. In fact, I would like very much, Richard, to show you and to analyze this table of the enlightenment or the light which will come on the year 5776, because all the details there, is written that divinity will be revealed, and Purim, it means that so many words are connected there, which is really very, very far from being coincidence.
Okay, so you get how excited Rabbi Glazerson is, but here comes just a ton of caution about what we just heard. Rabbi Glazerson and a bunch of people doing Torah codes, and I can't point to any one of them specifically and say I know this for a fact, but they all talk about needing to understand the Zohar, the Torah codes, Kabbalah, and I just got to say this is those are pagan origins mixing with the Torah and the Tanakh. And we talked about this before. From the Bible, we get that the Jewish people, time of Jacob's trouble, accept the Antichrist. Daniel 9:27. They don't figure it out until the midpoint of the tribulation. Revelation 6, the first seal, the rider on the white horse in Revelation 6. The Jews they accept the Antichrist as Messiah. And at the midpoint of the tribulation, they start to wake up to what really happened. And we get from Revelation that they should flee to the mountains. And in the Old Testament it says they go to Basra, which is the mountainous region southeast of Jerusalem, maybe the city of Petra. But this is perfectly patterning what the Bible said. This has got to be something significant, saints. That's all I'm saying is He's completely convinced, that Rabbi Glazerson is, that the Messiah is coming on March 26th. I mean, you heard for yourself what he was saying. Now, um, they always take a careful approach. People are reporting the Torah codes because they've seen the codes not manifest the way that they had tried to understand them. Many of them do, but they know that some of them don't. And so this all goes back to what was God's intent with the codes in the Bible. And I'll argue he was not only reflecting the truths that of what was going to happen, but he was reflecting what the common culture was saying in the time when those codes were speaking of, so that if you looked back on historical fact, they're all in the Torah codes exactly right. But if you're trying to look forward, you don't know if you're looking at the things that are going to happen, or if you're looking at the comments of the day that were being said about what was to happen. And so that's why it's ingenious, right? When you look backwards, it validates God's, authenticating his foreknowledge of what's going to happen. But if you try and look forward, like if you try and use it for divination, you try and look forward, you could just be looking at codes that the Lord put in there that just reflect what the culture was saying in the day. And that way you just won't know, is it the real thing or is it not? Okay, so this is a very big deal. Now I got to show you something. You heard him clearly say Purim was March 26th. And that set me off because I knew, well, I didn't think that was the case, put it that way. And in another part of this video, he talked about, I'll hold that, but that would imply that Passover is April. Now I got to show you something here. I'm at Torah calendar. And again, anybody that tries to talk about dates in advance using the Hebrew calendar is subject to error, because some of the dates are dependent on the crop cycle, especially like Passover, with the barley being having to be in a specific growth stage called a Abib. And I just did a video and I made quick reference to that and saying you can't really know if Torah code or if Torah calendar is right or not because of that situation. And then 2 or 3 people messaged me, linked into the comments, that this group that's in Israel that checks the barley now declared that it was an Abib just before, just before we come into the season of Passover here. So technically, using the barley and all, Passover would be March then. Now check this out. Rabbi Glazerson said the Messiah would come on Purim if he's understanding. I mean, he's basically saying, I'm not trying to put words in his mouth. Go back and watch the whole video. But he's so excited he flew all the way to California just to show these tables to Mr. Shaw that, this is basically what he's saying. So now I need to point something out. When is the 26th if the calendar was going to have Passover in March and not April? It's right here. The risen Lamb of God. This is the Sunday, Resurrection Day, on our calendar. Isn't that wild? And so on Resurrection Day, Rabbi Glazerson thinks is Purim. And if you guys know your little Bible history, Purim was the day when Esther finally convinced the king to issue the decree that saved all of Jerusalem, or sorry, saved all of Israel that had been dispersed into the Babylonian and eventually ruled over by the Medo-Persians. And so it's a picture of the redemption of all Israel. That's what Rabbi Glazerson thinks is going to happen, is Messiah is going to come, very likely, this Purim, which he thinks is the 26th of March. And yet, because the barley was technically in Abib, Passover instead is happening here in March, or the whole calendar's up a month earlier than what Rabbi Glazerson is saying. And Passover happens this month, and the Resurrection Day is on Sunday here on the 26th, 27th. So I'm afraid to to say what's in my mind here, but let's just say wouldn't it be plausible that if the rapture happens somewhere around this time frame, Easter or Passover, I hate saying Easter, the Resurrection Day, the Passover Day, even the Triumphal Entry Day are all, in my mind, candidates for the rapture of the church, especially if you look down here, if the Jews in Israel think that this is the redemption day for all Israel, that very likely is the day that the Antichrist appears then, because that's who they're going to accept. So I don't know if that means the church goes and the Antichrist reveals himself, aka 2 Thessalonians 2 kind of deal. The restrainer leaves and Antichrist appears, or if the church maybe would leave earlier on like Passover or on the triumphal entry day, and then the transition happens with the Antichrist showing up on what they think is Purim, the redemption of all Israel, which will really be Resurrection Day in terms of the Hebrew calendar, including using the barley as your guidepost. Finding the barley in Abib would be this month. So I don't know, Saints, I'm just my head's blowing now. He mentioned that also he was finding the Torah codes that Nibiru was going to be visible at that point. Well, I actually tried to get a hold of Gil Broussard through his YouTube or his email, I forget which, last night, because it was bugging me that Gil Broussard basically has been putting out some interviews and videos lately where he's saying, well, things must be maybe in a year or in a couple more years, because it looks like Passover is going to come and go. And Nibiru, that's the timing he's got for Nibiru actually impacting, causing destruction on the earth. And you guys know, if you want to follow me here, I'll just show you quick why I'm fairly convinced that the damage Nibiru is going to cause, Planet 7X, whatever you want to call it, is really at Pentecost and not Passover. Let me just quick get into that. Okay, so the damage, according to Gil Broussard, and I agreed once I studied this, I think this is reasonable. If it's something like Nibiru, Planet 7X, whatever, it sure fits what's going to happen here in Revelation 6 and Revelation 8. Now listen to this. And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became as black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. Okay, remember that. Sun going black, moon to blood. And the stars of the heaven fell to earth, even as a fig tree casts her timely figs when she is shaken by a mighty wind. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it's rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. You get the sense of how massive, how earth-changing this is. And the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, every bondman, every freeman, hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us, hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath has come. Who should stand? So the two things to nail into your brain: part of this is the sun going dark and the moon to blood, and that happens before the great day occurs. And then you can see, whatever these stars falling to Earth are, wouldn't that make sense? And this is, I think, Gil Broussard's argument, that this is all the debris in the tail, or, in front of or in the tail of Nibiru as it's making its approach. Okay, now how do you get to Pentecost? It's this way. When you look at Pentecost in the Bible, Acts 2, the Holy Spirit gets poured out. Then, the apostles get challenged, saying, because they're speaking in foreign languages and everybody's understanding them in their own language, because it's the day of Shavuot for the Jews. All the males needed to be at the temple for the celebration, and yet, even though they came from all over, the Middle Eastern world, they were all hearing what was being said in their native tongue. And so here Peter gets up and he's saying, these are not drunken as you suppose, because it's the third hour of the day, but this is what was spoken of by the prophet Joel. And it shall come to pass in the last days, saith God, that I'll pour out my spirit on all flesh, and your sons and daughters shall prophesy, your young men shall see visions, and your old men dream dreams. And on my servants and my handmaids I'll pour out in those days my spirit, and they shall prophesy. Well, that did happen, right? That's exactly what was going on. And I will show wonders in the heavens above, and signs in the earth beneath, blood and fire and vapor of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon to blood, before that great and notable day of the Lord come. Bam, there's your sixth seal in Revelation. And what day did this happen on? When the day of Pentecost had fully come. So Pentecost, in my mind, is the arrival of Planet 7X and Nibiru. So if you back up from there, one of the other things that Gil Broussard said is this should be visible in the sky, sort of without special infrared, technical equipment. You should be able to see this thing coming. I think he said like 40 days or something, or 50 days, 40 days before it actually causes that destruction on Earth. And that timing is just pretty stunning, because that would put it, if it was going to actually show up on Pentecost, that would put it in this time frame where it would start to be visible. Now, if you've watched some of my videos recently, I've been watching Steve Olson has a YouTube channel, and he's got a whole bunch of Skycam footage from Skycams all over the world here, and he shows them every day. And I'll tell you what, it's becoming more and more compelling what he's got. You could look at, the first couple of them and say, oh, he's just imagining things or whatever, but he's had hundreds of photos and video snippets now where he's looking at what sure appears to be the same set of objects coming, and they appear to be surrounded in a red cloud, and he's convinced actually that this red cloud is already impacting our atmosphere, and he goes into all the reasons why. But for me, these things are all lining up in a pretty incredible way. Is the Jews being deceived, thinking it's the Messiah coming and the redemption of all Israel that would fit picture perfect with the Antichrist showing up on what they believe is Purim, because that was the deliverance of all Israel from the Old Testament. They would be solidly convinced that that person that shows up is the Mashiach. Now, in reality, if that was Resurrection Day and the Messiah that showed up, according to what they're seeing in the Torah codes, is showing up on Resurrection Day and not Purim, and the church leaves, wouldn't that be an unbelievable coincidence? Saints, I don't know. I'm just, my head's spinning. Of course, these are just scenarios. And if we're still here in 2017 and I'm still looking at calendars and doing Bible studies, you know what, it's just another day that came and went, and it was very interesting what was going on at this time. But if you wanted to declare the high rapture watch time frame, I would say these 2 weeks in here that we're coming into right now are the, high rapture watch time. So as I record this video, it's the 17th, and I would say if we got all the way down here to like the 27th and the 28th, fine. This was just nothing, but it would be pretty, um, it would fulfill my expectation, let's put it that way, if the Lord used this time frame. And for those of you that haven't been on my channel for a while or haven't seen some of my older videos, I sort of at least convinced myself that the last feast that the Lord needs to fulfill, Rosh Hashanah, the 10 days of awe, Yom Kippur, and then Tabernacles all happen at the second coming. And so for me, as I was tracking this back, the rapture had to be either not tied to a feast day at all, and I think the doctrine of imminence is found there in Scripture because we're anxiously awaiting. Well, if you knew which day it was or which feast it was, you wouldn't be anxiously waiting. You would just be marking off time until the next appointed time, right? But I think God might just use first fruits here or the real Passover as the day of the rapture. I don't know. Okay, well, take it to the Lord, as everybody says in prayer. I'm pretty excited, but like I say, if this all comes and goes, we just keep our our tinfoil hats in place for the next thing. Lord is good to His word, and so it will happen. Maybe not now, maybe in a year or whatever, but for me, these things are really lining up, and the deception that causes the Jews to believe in the Antichrist, boy, that couldn't be more perfect than to have potentially the Antichrist showing himself on Purim. So there you go, Saints. Leave me notes below. If you think I'm completely crazy, don't bother leaving me a note below. Click the video off and go somewhere else and bother someone else. But if you thought this through, if you think I'm off base, okay, fine. You can leave me a note below. I don't know. I think we might be going home soon, Saints. God bless. Can't wait to see everybody.